Welcome, everyone. We are going to have a very interesting discussion about imagery training to improve motivation and adherence to physical activity. And we have a great guest for this episode. He is a chartered psychologist and has done his PhD at University of Plymouth in UK. He is the founding partner of Imagery Coaching, company that measures and trains imagery ability. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest, Dr. Jon Rhodes. Welcome, Jonathan.
Much. Thank you.
Yeah, nice to have you. So, should we start with your story? Would you like to tell?
Sure. Yeah. So my background is primarily in sport. I got involved in sport many moons ago, probably about 15 years ago, working in fairly. As you start in any sport, you start at the bottom and work your way up. And I was fortunate to get a few good breaks early on in sport, which led me to work with a few very good athletes. So a few world-class athletes, Olympians, etc., and learning along the way what it takes to be at that level, and trying my hardest to also educate those who aren't at that level as well to be more consistent in what they're doing. So my journey started, as I say, quite a few years ago, and now more so working across the board. So I work in healthcare, I work in with the military, I work with public, looking at ways to measure and then train imagery ability with the aim to get people to be more motivated and to support them to try and achieve goals and actually set new goals afterwards as well. So that's kind of been the journey. And then imagery coaching, the organization was set up a couple of years ago with Joe Grover, who's over in the States, he's in Miami. And we were on a mission to work with individuals with the belief that we know we can support people to find their purpose, to find meaning in what they're doing, and also to achieve goals. So again, that's now expanded our work from sport now into more business. We work with rather large companies. So KPMG is one that we work with, for example, IBM. We work with organizations which, who want to become more consistent to perform. But again, nowadays that's quite holistic. So performance is well-being. It's about balance, about trying to decrease burnout, thinking about really opportunities for people to find their passion and to really re-spark passion and to become more motivated along the way to not just support themselves, but also to look at the bigger picture as well and support others around them as well. So that's kind of been our journey. And now we're in the latter stages of writing a book as well. So we are on that kind of home straight. So it's been a real journey, Ollie, to get here now.
Mm. And were you working as a practitioner before you started the PhD, or which way did the ideas go and the motivation? Yeah.
It's always a weird way around. I think everyone does it in a very different, rounded way to become a psychologist. From my background, I'm always a passionate researcher. So I've been researching for quite a few years with teams. Usually in sport, if you work with a top sport or team, they don't want you to publish any data because it's obviously all very confidential. But it's always been my aim to try and disseminate what I've done in the research field and to try and make it more user friendly. Because of course we know that we write academic journals, but not many people read academic journals. So the aim is to then disseminate that to an audience that can say, hey, we can use a few of these ideas and really see that impact over time as well. So and again, in behavior change, which is where I'm currently working, it's tricky. It's a messy area to work in, but through a lot of hard work and perseverance, you're starting out as a practitioner, exploring ways that things may work and also things may not work. I was able to then come up with some ideas around using imagery to enhance performance, and then had a couple of very good supervisors along my journey to support me as well. And then my PhD, I did that part-time, but finished it pretty quickly. I was very lucky to have the participants to do research with, so I've been quite lucky along the way just to network and through a lot of serendipity as well. A lot of things, just networks that have just come off And of course, with research, you might do the best project that you think is amazing, and actually you don't find a great deal. So again, it's a lot of learning along the way, problem solving, and also networking with people who are very good at what they do. So that's kind of been my journey, is really sharing information, stealing information sometimes, borrowing information, cross-pollinating ideas, and then yeah, with the aim to research some outputs of of what it all means. And also, we're now working a lot more in climate change as well with governments and all sorts of people, because it really matters. And what we're doing, also, we're seeing huge benefits across the board.
Mm. And maybe about this, that you did your PhD part-time. I did also mine. And maybe there is health and fitness professionals who are maybe thinking of doing a PhD and probably part-time. What would you say about the experience? What would you like to say to people who are considering it?
Yeah, I mean, the usual obstacle people perceive is that they're not very good at stats, and people generally, especially in that kind of more activity-based area or domain, people generally assume that there's going to be, which there generally is, but there are always people to support you with stats. But I came from a background of a lot of applied work, and then I went into my PhD. So I had a few years under my belt first before I even thought about what I wanted to specialize in, and that was the real. I think that's the real important part, is to actually, if you finish your degrees, and then have some you time to figure out what you want to specialize in before you then rush into a certain area. And I've been very lucky to have that kind of thinking space. And again, lucky to be working with people who are very good at what they do, sharing ideas, and yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. But I'd also say that time management with a part-time PhD, it worked out really well for me. I could never do a full-time PhD because I'm not that way inclined to just focus on that one thing. I like to spin plates, so it worked out quite well for me. But I would definitely say, if you're keen to do a PhD, or if you have a research interest, dive in. Absolutely dive in. Find people who are going to add value to what your area is. So whatever you're reading, find those people. Hopefully they'll supervise you, and go all in to an extent as well. So that's kind of what I did. Still spinning plates, of course, with consultancy, but then it worked out well because I was working in an industry, and kind of taking the data as well from those individuals who I was working with, being able to use it as more of a research base, and then getting support with statistics, and that's the main bit of advice I'd say is for a holistic researcher, the stats part is really important, but you'll get help along the way. So don't be put off by it.
And how did you do the practicalities? Did you take certain times off fully for PhD? Did you work weekends, nights, or how did you do it?
Yeah, so it was a real mixture. I had about in my kind of 4 years of doing it, I had a couple of months off in the year to go and collect data. So I'm very good at kind of time managing, and looking at availability of like going to competitions or going to events, and trying to put as much in as possible. And so I would say to myself, well, I'm going to go to, so I'm based in Plymouth, but I'm going to go to London. What else is around? What will I, who will I pass along the way on my route? So I would absolutely get those connections, and then my 2 months were very much streamlined around collecting data. But yeah, fortunately for me, because I was working in industry as well, I had exposure to a lot of good athletes, a lot of good practitioners along the way. So people who were, fantastic physiotherapists, occupational therapists, good psychology, fantastic psychologists to work from and learn from as well. And then, of course, the athlete side, of the client side, I was very lucky to have those guys as well. Almost, not quite, but almost on tap. So yeah, very fortunate.
And how much was there overlap between your practitioner work and your PhD? How much did they benefit each other?
Hugely, yeah. For me, it was, I would say, the overlap was massive. maybe kind of more 60-70% of overlap. So I wasn't having to go out and find new clients as such, or participants to research with. So yeah, I was really fortunate to do that. But again, for anyone thinking about doing a PhD, connections are really key. So just, whatever you can do in your first year to build those connections. Usually that first year is lit review kind of stuff where you analyze, what various journals, and you're analyzing, various content. So in that year, build connections. And then in year 2, that's when I would then try to go out and explore that data collection, and year 3 for me as well. So that's kind of how I worked it. But it was a lot of early mornings, late evenings. I think it's the same for everyone, Ollie, with doing PhDs. You start it thinking it's going to be okay, I can manage it, and you get to a point where you think, why the heck am I doing this? Like this is taking up all my headspace. And then you kind of you come out of the trenches and you think, well, actually, I can see light finally. So yeah, again, if you're thinking of doing it, or if you're doing a PhD, there is light.
That is true. So if we talk a little bit about your PhD, and so what kind of studies you had in your PhD?
Sure, yeah. So I've got quite a few studies in my PhD. So I start off with more of a qualitative analysis, looking at grit is where I start, and like things around resilience. So I start by looking at Olympic swimmers and looking at what makes them so kind of mentally tough, I suppose, and learning some lessons from them as well. But of course, when you interview an Olympian, you say, can you, you've maxed out my scale of being mentally tough. And they say, right, yeah, maxed it out. I'm 5 out of 5 for mental toughness or resilience. And you say to them, well, do you think you could still improve on your level of mental toughness? And they'll say, absolutely. I don't feel like I'm 5 out of 5. So again, creating scales and looking at better ways to measure athletes and people who are very driven anyway, and then coming up with ways to support others who may potentially be not as driven, or perhaps they haven't quite found their purpose or meaning. Which again is another kind of key thing, is that I found from the first paper that that individuals who are Olympians, usually at a very young age, say, this is it, this is me, this is what I want to do. And they know why. So they'll say, I'm doing it because it's going to benefit my family. And I'm doing it because it's going to benefit my grandchildren. Saying, but you're only 11 years old. How can you have that thought when you're 11? So actually having that deeper thought at that very young age is really interesting. Not that, and again, when I work in schools now and do various things with youngsters, and even with adults, to be honest as well, and you say to an adult, what's your passion, what's your purpose? People generally may not know. So again, it's trying to really examine those areas and looking at where purpose lies. And I think that people generally confuse purpose with meaning. So I would see them as very different factors. So purpose, for example, would be, what beyond me am I doing this for? Who else is it going to benefit? What's the wider kind of goal? And then meaning is, what does it matter to me? Why is it important to me right now? So I think having those two very, looking at those two words and personifying those words creates action. And that's really where the research projects have gone, is looking at how can we look at purpose? How can we teach people to use imagery in a way which is hugely focused on purpose, and then bring it back to why is it important to you based on meaning, and then what can you do immediately? What can you do right now to then focus on, taking a first step or a second step and really changing behavior or maintaining what you're doing. So again, those areas are really important, but primarily that was the kind of the takeaway from the first paper. Yeah, so that's the kind of journey. I like, interviewing people, and then lots of empirical studies as well, looking at data analysis of big groups. So again, looking at near 400 athletes and all across different levels, from elite down to the non-elite youngsters, and what are the differences between it could be between purpose and meaning, but also things like imagery for us were really important. We know that elite athletes are using imagery a great deal, and young athletes are not so. So again, we can teach those youngsters how to use imagery to then try to benefit them in a way which is will get them through challenges. And now where I am now in terms of the research is we're across lots of different areas. So we work in healthcare with individuals who know that they should exercise but are just not motivated. So again, looking at that kind of people often come to us and say, I've tried it before and it hasn't really worked. So then we can use some of these ideas around using imagery to really support people to stick to goals. So that's the real takeaway from a lot of the research that I've done. I did historically in my PhD is, how can we get people to stick to their goal and appreciate it's going to be tough. Like doing a PhD, if you've thought about the hard work and how tough it's going to be, and probably the conversation you've had with yourself about wanting to quit, because it happens to us all, maybe it's not right for me. Maybe I can't do this stuff. Maybe these conversations, if you have them right at the start and you accept that that's part of the process, and then almost restructuring what that thought will go like. So planning ahead. Well, at that point, I'm aware of that. But what I'm going to say to myself at that point is, I'm going to say, look, you've worked hard to get here. It's going to be worthwhile in the end. Who's it going to impact beyond me? Why is it important to me? And what can I currently do? And that's generally the model that we've used to work with individuals off the back of the PhD, but also off the back of a load of applied work beyond it as well.
And about imagery training, usually it's people think that it's more about practicing, like thinking about the technique or thinking about how the event will go, how is the kind of preparing for a competition. How is it in research and in practice about imagery? How much is it about technique and preparation, and how much is it about purpose and meaning?
Okay, so if you focus, so you're talking about two things. So imagery, we can split into a couple of things. First up, we've got cognitive imagery. So cognitive imagery, as we know it, is technical factors. If you're a diver and you're focusing on your foot position and feeling your weight go forwards as you dive off the board, and the kinesthetics, the movement, this is cognitive imagery. The other side as well is motivational imagery. And motivational imagery is hugely important because we know that that's the side that has the purpose and the meaning. That's the side that is going to get you to stick to various tasks because it has real emotive, passionate, harmonious way of working as well. So we need to combine those two areas, the cognitive imagery and the motivational imagery, for behavior to stick. So we know that if you're focusing mostly on cognitive imagery, it'll be hugely beneficial for your task. So if you're a diver, again, it'll help you with your diving pattern. It'll help you with your performance. And again, you can, in your headspace, you can pause it and rewind it and focus on, the right position. But we want to also focus on that motivational part as well. So why is it important for you to do it? How does it feel when you complete a successful dive? On the other side, which people don't usually talk about, which is what's it like if you don't do it, if you fail, And for us, failure is a very important word to look at because struggle. People don't talk about struggle. They don't say, hey Ollie, I had a great struggle yesterday. Oh John, what would you struggle about? That's not a conversation people generally have, but we should have it because struggle means that we are working hard, we are passionate about something. We're investing effort, and struggle is, is a word which we need to be praised for because we know that when we struggle at something, it's got a meaning to it. So those conversations that I would have with players, with athletes, with businessmen are about, what are you struggling with? Why are you struggling with this? Or even in the gym, when we work with clients in the gym, we think about, it's going to be a struggle to get fit, to lose weight, to get healthy. These are all going to be struggles. Cool. That's amazing. It means that you're working on something that means something to you. So let's play that out together. So again, having these conversations are really important on this cognitive and motivational side. And what we do with individuals is we add layers to how they use imagery. so that we assess them first, and then we would train them in their ability to use imagery.
Yeah, I think that's important and interesting point. I think many times athletes try to do imagery only for successful things, and I think that's kind of a guideline that you just succeed all the time. So, do you see benefit going through in your imagery, failing kind of the repetitions or anything, or failing the whole Olympics? Do you see it practical? Do you see it useful?
This is it. This is there are never any secrets in research, but this is the X factor for us. Is that what we do? Is we use a lot of mental contrasting between what does it feel like to fail. Okay, so let's give an example of like a weight loss client. So, if I don't lose the weight, I know what that feeling's like. It feels uncomfortable. It feels awful. I feel like I put effort in. I've tried really hard, but I've let myself down. Where would you be when you're feeling that? Like, what's the timeline like? When it's a year on, I haven't really made any changes. I look at the scales; they're still the same. I think, how is this going to impact my ability to go on holiday with my grandkids, with my kids? How much energy do I feel like I've got? Well, not a great deal. So we get them to have that experience. And then we say, right, now that you've had that experience, let's turn the tables around slightly. How does it feel like to have succeeded, to have got that goal, to have, you're on holiday now with the grandkids and they're playing around with you. And what are you doing? How do you feel? Well, I feel, I don't feel like I have lost a great deal of weight, but I feel a lot healthier. I feel like, like I'm me again. I feel like, so again, this point of mentally contrasting the negative emotion with the positive emotion amplifies motivation. This is the key point. And that point, when we talk about, like, we use a lot of motivational interviewing, and with motivational interviewing in mind, this is the evoke stage. We are evoking motivation to the nth degree. We are we are really spending our energy increasing motivation by evoking this ability to change. And when you do that also, it feels closer than it really is. So, if you think about long-term goals, a year away feels like, oh gosh, a year of hard work, of whatever. God, that feels like it's in the real distance. But what we do is we get people to experience the future right now. And that timeline decreases and it feels like a reality. And that reality increases motivation. But also what we know is, working with athletes, if we don't experience those negative thoughts, they will come anyway, but they'll come informally. They will come as a spontaneous, intrusive thought, which we all have, of course, that pop into our heads, that we try to say, no, we don't want to elaborate on it in detail, and we divert attention in a way. But what we need to do is really focus on that thought. That's fine to have a negative thought, and then, of course, logically go through, well, what are you doing now to actually help a future you? What are you currently doing and this kind of then merges onto CBT in a way, although you're your own therapist in a strange paradox. But this is it, and people often say to me about fit, and they say, functional imagery training, what approaches are you using? Like, it seems quite holistic. Well, yeah, because it's person-centered. We're talking about individual goals. I'm not going to plan for you. You're going to plan for you, because I don't know what could work, and you need to come up with your own ideas. We're using CBT in a way, of course, as well. We are using ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. We're using this as well to say, we're going to commit to our goals, but this is where we are, so the reality of where we are. We're using a great deal. There are parts as well that we use which are more mindfulness based. We're looking at elaboration intrusion theory. So there's loads of things that we're focusing in on that we use, and that's how psychology should be run. It should be holistic. It should be a merging of lots of different approaches for us, and also it should be focused on mastery. So we always look at mastery based on you're learning to upskill your ability to use imagery, whilst also getting better at the technical elements or the tactical elements, or just the self acceptance and understanding of where you currently are.